Welcome to the Church and Culture Podcast, a weekly discussion with Dr. James Emery White on the latest trends happening in culture and where and how the church should respond. Jim is the founding and senior pastor of Mecklenburg Community Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, president of Serious Times, a ministry devoted to exploring the intersection of faith and culture, former professor of theology and culture at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, where he also served as their fourth president, and the author of more than 20 books. I am your host, Alexis Dry, and I can't wait to dive into this week's conversation. Thanks for joining us for this week's conversation. So there's a new animated film on Netflix that has everyone talking, or I guess I should say singing along or humming along. It's called K-Pop Demon Hunters, and it was released back in June, and it was an instant success. But rather than kind of tape off, which is common, it has actually only continued to grow and gain more and more momentum. So much so that it recently launched away from Netflix and onto the big screen, appearing in a sing-along format so that fans could experience it in a new way. Also, several songs from its soundtrack, including Golden, Your Idol, and Soda Pop, are in the Billboard Top 10. So all to say, its influence spans well beyond Netflix viewership. But for any of our listeners who have never heard of it before, can you tell them a bit about the premise? What in the world is K-Pop Demon Hunters about?
Before I answer that, there's actually more to the global phenomenon than you mentioned. Let me give you some breaking news. You mentioned that they launched it onto the big screen. Get this, they released it for just 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, in just 1,700 theaters. For whatever reason, the whole AMC theater chain declined it. So they didn't even have that. So just 1,700 theaters for sing-along screenings. And despite that, it still won the entire box office for the weekend. Beat everybody out, giving Netflix its first number one box office title in its 18-year history. The 2-day sing-along in limited theaters beat out every single film. So it was already the most watched animated film, original film in Netflix. And then it just became the most watched film of any kind on Netflix of all films. Number one, nothing's been watched more of any kind of film. Number one animated, number one film in terms of streams, and now number one at the box office. So what is it about? The film centers on Huntrix, a fictitious all-girl K-pop superstar trio who double as demon hunters. K-pop, if you don't know, stands for Korean pop, or more specifically, Korean pop music. The members of the Huntrix trio are Rumi, Mira, and Zoe. They have special powers, which they have used or do use to protect their fans and also to face their biggest enemy, which is a rival boy group, the Saja Boys, who are made up of demons in disguise who are out to destroy them. Their goal is to maintain the Hanmoon, which is a magical barrier that prevents evil creatures from entering the human world. And they do that through song. The songs they do build up the Hanmoon until their singing powers it. The demon boy band attempt to steal their fame and to steal their fans and let all the demons that have been kept out of the world into the world to suck out human souls and power their demon king. There's a demon love story thrown in there too, but I'll save you that. So that's the gist of it.
When you think about this film, it kind of makes me laugh to imagine how every filmmaker dreams of having this kind of success, the kind of success that you just described. But few achieve that. Few can cross cultural lines like that. So what is its special ingredient? How has it done it?
The music and dance. Without a doubt, it's the things that made K-pop itself such a global phenomenon, with groups like BTS and Blackpink. I know you're way up in your K-pop. So, for example, the song Golden from the movie is currently number one on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. But that's not all. As you mentioned, other songs are on there, but actually 3 other songs, not just 2, 3 other songs are on the soundtrack on the Billboard's 100 Top 10 as we speak. That's never happened before. It's the first time in all of Billboard history that a soundtrack from a single movie has had 4 simultaneous Hot 100 Top 10s. 4 Top 10 at the same time. And it's the first time in 30 years that any soundtrack has, forget top 10, that any has even produced that many hits. The last one was Waiting to Exhale with Whitney Houston. The one before that was the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever. But even they didn't have 4 songs at the same time in the top 10. So right now, the top 10, as you mentioned, you have the songs, you have Golden, you have Your Idol, you have Soda Pop, and then you have How It's Done. So you have all 4 of them in there. 2 of those are by the group trio Huntrix. 2 of those are by the demon group Soulja Boys. Also, when I checked, and this was really stunning, 7 of the top songs on the soundtrack, 7 of the songs on the soundtrack were among the top 20 most played songs on Spotify. So 7 of the songs among the top 20 on Spotify. So obviously, music drives this. I mean, let's just face it. But that's not all. Couple that with really strong female characters, and the characters operating kind of out of their vulnerability. Their vulnerability is their strength. And it's like you just have the recipe that made Disney's Frozen a hit all over again. In fact, when I watched it, I was thinking, I don't think they purposely tried to rip off Frozen, but they sure did take a lot of the things that made Frozen successful and put it in there. Strong female characters, strong female relationships, vulnerabilities. We'll get into this, I'm sure, but kind of accepting who you are kind of stuff and finding power in that. And so very Frozen-ish that way. So get ready for this. And of course the music. So get ready for this to be around a while. Not only is there obviously talk of a sequel as fast as they can humanly make it, but it could become a major franchise. Think merchandise, think parks, theme parks, think more soundtracks. And to add to its power, adults like it too.
I wanted to talk about this not only because this is such a huge phenomenon right now, but also because a lot of viewers of ours were hoping that we would talk about it. A couple wrote into us asking for us to talk about it because it has the word demons in the title, and so concerned about whether that would be appropriate or not for their children. I mean, I would say rightfully so. If your 8-year-old is asking your permission to watch a show about demons, it's probably understandable that you'd want to do a little bit of research. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you've heard Dr. White talk about the dangers of the world of the occult and demons. So where does this movie fall into that conversation?
Let me give a bit of a lengthier answer on that. Can you imagine how several years ago someone might have felt if a little child came home and said, "Hey, I want to read a book about a witch"? And they say, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, I want to read a book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe." Okay, that'd be a red flag. I'm not having you read a book about a witch. And yet, as we all know, that was the first of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and was a deeply Christian book, and a very much a book of analogies about that. Allegories. So just like you might have been concerned about that, it's easy to get kind of hung up on a title, a word like demon, and it jumps out at you, or witch, or something like that. I think we need to draw the line, particularly when it comes to film and literature, between 2 different presentations of evil, and even 2 very different presentations of things like witches or even demons. Think about, let me just use the Harry Potter book as a foil, the Harry Potter books and their subsequent movies. When they first came out, it divided Christians big time into 2 camps. Those who saw author J.K. Rowling's books as dangerously occultic, and those who placed the stories in the fantasy camp, along with such writers as Lewis Carroll and Roald Dahl and C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Those who put Harry in the dangerous camp were concerned about the use of magic and the presence of certain dark themes and even violence, and of course, witches. They dismissed him as being blatantly occultic and forbid their children to read them. At the time, and I still stand by this, I said that to think of those books as evil and wrong and harmful in and of themselves was misguided. As Christian author Chuck Colson, the late Chuck Colson, wrote, along with other Christian writers and thinkers such as Richard Mouw and Connie Neal and Alan Jacobs and Francis Bridger, all of them were writing at the time that the magic used in the books, and I think this is very important, was mechanical, not blatantly occultic. And by mechanical, I mean no more than the magical powers of Superman. Superman didn't cast a spell on himself or try to get in touch with the occultic world before his powers. His powers were mechanical, his fantasy world. It was attempting to be fantasy. It wasn't attempting to be reality or to draw people into some kind of mirror of reality. There is no contact with the supernatural, no demonic world in the classical form of the occult, even though there are demons and witches as part of the story. In truth, they are simply best deemed morality tales. And the magic is used as, certainly in the Harry Potter books, as a metaphor for power. Um, and you could make the same case for Lord of the Rings and even Narnia. The overarching theme is the fight between good and evil, and that evil is real and it must be resisted. The characters develop courage, they develop loyalty and the willingness towards self sacrifice. So, in and of themselves, the Harry Potter books are, I would say, best lumped with the fantasy works of Lewis and Tolkien. Again, where wizards and witches and magical potions also abound in the world of Lewis and Tolkien, but in a fantasy framework where the authors present them to show good is good and evil is evil, and to have it be that kind of foil. In fact, it's interesting, a lot of people don't know this. Rowling's appreciation ran so deep for C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia that she patterned her 7 books after the 7 Chronicles of Narnia. 7 for 7 because she was such a fan and she wanted to match that. She herself is a professing Christian. She's a member of the Church of Scotland. And while she doesn't pretend that the Harry Potter books are overtly Christian books, a Christian worldview is obviously present on most of its pages. This doesn't mean that parents shouldn't talk of their children through these kinds of books. They should. As with any fantasy book, you should make sure that your child is old enough to know the difference between fantasy and reality. I think that's a parental deal. And the Harry Potter books are not kiddie books by any means. The books in the series become increasingly mature. In the first book, he is 11. By the 7th book, he is 17. And it reflects that kind of age progression. Parents should also make sure that they help their children contrast the mechanical magic, the mechanical fantasy magic in the books, and the fantasy magic in all fairy tales and children's literature, whether it's Snow White or Cinderella. All of them have the same kind of things. You compare that with the real life witchcraft the Bible condemns, which encourages involvement with supernatural evil of the real kind. But the larger conversation, I think, can be more positive. And the Harry Potter books and films, for example, to keep with that, give every parent and child something to think about as Christians, and such as the reality of good and evil, the critical importance of choices, and the nature of sacrificial love. Okay, K-pop Demon Hunters draws a lot from Korean mythology and fantasy and pop culture and kind of merges them. One writer called it K-pop Hannah Montana meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Frozen. And that's kind of the mash up that it is. The backstory of demons roaming the earth and sucking energy from human souls to feed their king until 3 female hunters arrive who would slay them with knives and bows and arrows and swords, and who are themselves singers whose songs fill people with hope and create a musical kind of soul barrier that keeps demons in hell. I think that can be placed pretty fairly in the fantasy camp. With magic being mechanical, not occultic in nature. I've watched it, and the film does a fair job of making evil evil, wrong wrong, right right, particularly as it's related to things like charisma and fame. It was particularly revealing about that. And the morals are fairly strong. There wasn't anything there that I think would make a cringe factor. I read that the songwriter behind the Saja Boys song Your Idol, he said in an interview that the lyrics of the song were actually inspired by Christian teaching about how it's wrong to engage in idol worship, which I found interesting. There's clear themes of repentance, clear themes of redemption. Not necessarily ticking every box on Christian theology, but those themes are there. So while I'm prepared to put this one into the fantasy camp, I am. With mechanical magic, that doesn't mean that it's 100% good theology, or doesn't need to be clearly delineated from the biblical idea of actual demons. Just like demons, quite frankly, in the work of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I mean, I would want my children to know, hey, that Balrog that Gandalf took on when he fell into the pit, that was a demon, but that's not necessarily how demons are presented in Scripture. So, you just need to take it as a fictional creation and talk about all things with your children. I don't care who wrote the book, and not get misconstrued with what actual demons are really like.
I have a follow-up about that then, and we've talked on earlier episodes about really just this cultural moment that villains are having right now, particularly on film and literature. And I'm referring to their humanization, that they're no longer evil, but they're just complicated or misunderstood. And some would argue that's kind of the case in this movie as well, that the demons are portrayed as struggling, like engaging this inner struggle with their emotions and their desires. How biblically accurate is that?
That's where I would want to camp out in terms of cultural critique and theological critique. But again, it's not pretending to be a Christian movie. I mean, so it's not like it's inviting like us to make sure it matches up to everything with Christian theology. But that's where I would critique it, though, culturally and theologically. And I'm not alone. There was a recent Christianity Today essay on both K-pop demon hunters and Labubu. And it was headlined, "We're not afraid of monsters and demons anymore." And they write, we're mollifying monsters, we're domesticating demons, we're humanizing them with sympathetic depictions, which is not biblically accurate at all with what we're talking about, to answer your question. In the movie, demons are portrayed as creatures with conflicting emotions. Certainly the lead one is, and a desire to do good, but torn between it. In fact, Rumi, who's the leader of Huntrix, the girl K-pop trio, battling the demons, is herself a half demon. It's revealed. And part of the film is her struggling to find out who she is and accept who she is. And then in the end, accepting it. But in the context of that acceptance, she eventually decides to fight for good and to become, the savior of the world. And so that's an interesting perspective on that. And it is, I said, it's very Frozen, which is all about, in that one, accepting yourself. I'm going to accept that everything I touch turns to snow or ice, and I have to accept who I am and let it go. And you find that in this as well, that the whole purpose of this, you find the road to what was needed was to stop hiding, stop not accepting yourself, stop trying to, don't let the world see who you really are in terms of your fears and your failures. Your true self is your best self. Embrace whoever you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is kind of a mixed bag. That really the key is not so much forgiveness, but self-acceptance. And if there is forgiveness, it's self-forgiveness. And so obviously those are things that a parent can talk about with a child. It can be very helpful. Okay, she felt she needed to do this, but what does the Bible say? Doesn't forgiveness go deeper than that? And isn't it more than just accepting yourself? Isn't it about realizing that there is sin in you and that you need forgiveness? These are great jumping off points for great conversations. So it's not like you just say, you can't watch that. It's like, well, let's talk about it. We'll get to that. But then you also have Jinu, who's one of the members of the demon boy band. And he is a human turned demon who ultimately sacrifices himself so that Rumi can defeat the demon king, the demon overlord, which is a nice way to have a demon's life end. I mean, who are acting badly start acting nicely and turn to good. But that obviously is not the way the demonic is in the real world. We don't want to go out and date a demon to try to have, win them to Jesus, which is kind of the plot. Of what Rumi does. Let me date you to salvation. Not exactly my pastoral counsel. Biblically, demons are neither safe nor are they morally ambiguous. They are not relatable. They're not funny. They're certainly not approachable. Isabel Ong, in her piece that I mentioned in Christianity Today, writes that, nothing is wholly bad or wholly good anymore. And if there's no capital G God around, well, then who defines what is good? Who defines what is evil? Well, we do. And it's almost as if in pop culture, we're viewing evil almost like we view ourselves. When we look at evil, we're reading it through the lens of our own selves. Yes, there is evil, there is bad, people do bad things, but even demons or even half demons can successfully overcome the darkness within by their own strength if they just would forgive themselves and accept themselves, which is pretty, not exactly a compelling, I mean, it's pop psychology, but it's certainly not robust theology or certainly what really will change a life. And again, there's no such blurring between the lines of good and evil in the Bible. As Ong notes, the Bible shares accounts of demons just wreaking havoc and just destroying people's lives and sowing chaos, and of course a God who has ultimate victory over those forces. No matter how they might be portrayed in fantasy, the Bible is absolutely clear that there is a supernatural world, and it's very live, very dynamic. It's filled with creatures, it's filled with activity, uh, entire class of beings known as demons who are fallen angels. Just so we're very clear, in case someone's just dialing in on this whole thing and may have never heard it discussed before, angels are spirit creatures created by God who are vastly powerful beings. There are many types of angels, and the Bible names a few of those types: cherubim, seraphim, and such. But the main thing is that there are good angels and there are bad angels. Um, Not all the angels that God created stayed loyal to Him. Some rebelled, lost their place in holy condition, and now oppose the work and the will of God. The Bible does not go into detail as to why God allowed those angels to be in opposition to Him. All we know is that God allowed them to exercise their free will as moral creatures, just like He has allowed us to exercise our free will. And just like angels, we will be judged at the end of time. And that is what a demon is: a fallen angel. That is also who Satan is: a very high, very powerful angel, most likely an archangel who chose to rebel. The book of Revelation says that as many as maybe a third of all the angels God created chose to follow Satan into his rebellion. The Bible says that much of the strategy is to try to appear benign of these, and to have their work, their manifestation, appear as something of God, or at least of a neutral power. Certainly to downplay the evil nature of their activity, even to go so far as to actually appear as an angel of light. And so, yeah, I don't think that K-pop Demon Hunters, though, is a gateway into the occult. It's a fantasy tale. It doesn't try to make all the demons good. It makes the vast majority of demons bad. It just made one of them kind of mixed emotions that was potentially savable. But it certainly didn't kind of airbrush all demons as, wasn't trying to create a biblical understanding of demons by any means, or a biblical worldview, or even try to make it heaven, hell, or anything like that. It wasn't even trying to be a Christian mythology. It was a fantasy. But I don't think it's a gateway into the cult. It's a fantasy tale, and it makes the fantasy demons bad. But I do think it opens the door to talk about how the fantasy, any fantasy, quite frankly, for that matter, compares to reality. And I just think it just invites a wonderful spiritual conversation. And in one sense, that's one of the benefits of it. It invites a very powerful, compelling, substantive, spiritual conversation, including the kind of morals that are often elevated, like the supreme importance of being true to yourself and accepting yourself as who you are. And is that really a philosophy to live by? Is that really the solution to everything? Is that really the greatest need of humankind? Or is it that we're sinners in need of forgiveness from the Savior? And so I think that's where parents can and should step in. And we can talk more about a parent's role if you'd like. But yeah, that was long answer, long response.
But yes, I do want to talk a little bit more about a parent's role, because as you mentioned, it's not just kids who are loving this movie. Parents are loving it too, particularly millennial parents like me, because it gives them the chance to relive their boy band and girl group days, and at the same time bond with their kids. So it feels like a win. Would you agree?
So which one was your favorite boy group?
Oh gosh. Backstreet Boys for sure.
Okay. All right, I'll let you off there. Well, in terms of, is this a win? Netflix sure does think so. And Sony, who produced it, sure thinks so. In fact, it's become a running joke on social media. You may have seen some of these memes floating around, and some of these videos taken on TikTok and thrown on Instagram, where moms and dads, they kind of film themselves like what their reaction is when their kid first says, I want to see this movie called K-pop Demon Hunters. And they're going, kind of thing. And then it shows them, okay, now that I've watched it the second time, how am I feeling? They're going, kind of moving with the music, And then by the fourth or fifth time, they're dressed as the characters and they're going crazy with glow sticks and everything else. So it's a kind of a running joke about how parents are reacting and warming up to this. But when it was released in movie theaters for the 2-day sing-along, there were all kinds of news articles showing pictures of not just parents bringing their kids to see it, but I mean, these parents were all in. They were dressed up as characters. The dads are dressed up as, the Saja boys and all this kind of stuff. And let's be honest, most parents are desperate for something that they can latch onto connect with their kids over, do with their kids, identify with their kids, share with their kids, do something with their child on a Saturday that their child is anxious to do with them. It's become a bonding experience for a lot of parents. That's the success, for example, of the 2-day sing along. It was a parent child moment. There was a New York Times article that said it just brings together the bonding parents long for and their own youth, as you mentioned, when they loved boy bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Destiny's Child. And except as one mom put it, now I'm handing out juice boxes instead of dancing like a rave with a glow stick.
On this topic of, just being such a big hit and everybody talking about it, it does make me think about, what is the church's role in that? Should the church be talking about it? Does the church have a role or responsibility in engaging kind of cultural phenomena like this, particularly as it relates to children?
Oh, my goodness. If we're not doing that, what are we doing? If we're not on the front lines of culture with, Netflix in one hand and the Bible in the other, then shame on us. That's exactly what we ought to be doing and what churches ought to be helping people to do and to think about. It's why we're talking about it. And so we have the lead role, if you will, in partnering with parents to think all things through biblically. We really do. Our children's ministry team, for example, recently did a blog on this for parents that I thought was just spot on. Just spot on. It actually was on K-pop Demon Hunters and how to engage movies and TV shows as a parent with your child. And I was so proud of our team. And they had several things listed. Let me just kind of give you a sampling of it. First, if you're not sure, watch it before they do. Make sure you watch it before them. Then second, ask yourself, as a parent, do I see any red flags? Specifically, does the show support principles or values that you know are in the Bible? If it does not match up with the Bible's teaching, ask yourself, do I have time to watch and engage this content with my child so I can ensure that my influence is stronger than the media's influence? That's key. All media will influence your child for good or bad, but your presence and wisdom will influence them even more if you engage it with them. And so how do you do that? Well, watch the content with your kids and comment when you see something you disagree with. Don't be afraid to go ahead and hit pause and say, whoa, kids, did you just hear that? Okay, I totally disagree with that. That is not, I know it's just made up, it's fictitious, it's a story, but, if something happens that you don't like, make sure that they know about it. This teaches your child to engage media with a critical mind rather than blindly accepting everything they see, because they're not going to be thinking about it like you are. If it's on TV, mute the ads and talk while the ads are on. Mute those ads. Most of the ads are terrible anyway. Build a habit of talking through commercial breaks with your kids about the content that they just watched. Not only will this give you space to comment on things, but it'll also influence or kind of lessen the influence advertising has on your child. Even when my kids were young, I wouldn't mute, but when there'd be a commercial that would come on and they would be saying something, I would just turn to the kids and say, well, that was stupid. Did you just hear what that commercial said? That was just stupid. That was just dumb. And then they say, what, Dad, what made it dumb? You said the S word. What was it? And I would say, well, they just made it sound like with that beer commercial that, this is the key to happiness, or this is what this is, or was it that, and just whatever. And, they just went, oh, yeah. And then later on that night, a commercial come on, they said, Dad, another dumb one. And I said, yeah, that was dumb. You're getting it. You're getting it. Another thing is let the credits run. When the movie is over, talk about what you just watched. Don't just walk out of the theater. Don't just, say to the kids, all right, now it's time to go to bed. Talk with them. Talk. You want to engage this thing together. And here's some questions to get you started. Ask them, what did you like about the movie? What did you like about the movie or the TV show? What did you like? What didn't you like? Was there anything that confused you? Just kind of made you didn't understand. What was your favorite character? What was admirable? And then when they say, well, my favorite character was da-da-da-da. Well, what was admirable about them? In other words, you're making them kind of put their like into the virtue category as opposed to something else. And if they can't do it, that's another good conversation. And then you ask, what was not admirable about them? What do you think Jesus would like about this movie or TV show? What do you think Jesus would like? I can just hear my grandson Boone saying, he killed all the demons. Yeah, Boone, that's going to happen at the end, isn't it? But you got to help him along. What do you think Jesus would not like about this movie or TV show? What was the overall lesson, message, or big idea of this movie or TV show? Do you agree with the lesson or the message or big idea? Do you think Jesus would agree with it? With this particular movie, I think the talking points, meaning K-pop Demon Hunters, I think the talking points are, is that what real demons are like? Obviously, this was fantasy. They weren't trying to portray the biblical thing. But is it like what the Bible says? Is the ultimate value being true to yourself? Or is it about being forgiven? Is it about accepting who you are no matter what, warts and all? Or is it about realizing this is who you are, warts and all, and God will accept you for that, but he also wants to go to work on the warts? Where is God in forgiving and life changing? Is the key to forgive yourself and change yourself? Or is the key to be forgiven and God change you? What is the real battle between good and evil? What did the movie get right and what did it get wrong about what's really going on with the battle of good and evil in this world? So those are just some, just good questions that, parents should be afraid of. And this movie particularly raises a lot of kinds of interesting things to talk about. And then the last thing I would just say to parents, besides all that, pray. Really pray. God exists, and because of that, the most powerful thing you can do to protect your child from being influenced by the media is to pray for it and pray for them. Pray for you to have wisdom and discernment, and pray for God to help you give them wisdom and discernment.
I'm glad we got to talk about this today. And thank you for those of you who did write us about this. Just so reflective of your desire to bring, these huge cultural phenomenon before, the foot of God, foot of Christ, and ask, what would he say about this? What would he think, really developing a Christian worldview? So thank you for that. I hope this was helpful. It was helpful for me as a parent. So either go watch it now or don't, but I'm glad that we got to weigh on it.
Parents, watch it first, no matter what.
Yes. Very, very true.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Jim. We'll catch you guys next week.
Bye-bye.